Hello my friends, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch and to my high tunnel. It is around 7:30 in the morning and this is when I most often spend time in my garden doing the maintenance things that we're going to do together today. My garden requires daily visits in the morning, usually in the morning because it's nice and cool in the morning. I'm not needing to do some of the other things that I need to do throughout the day, like cleaning and cooking and all those other things. And in order to keep a productive garden, maintenance is definitely required. So I thought I would take you around today and show you what I normally do when I'm spending some maintenance hours out in my garden. We're also going to do a little bit of harvesting in the garden. That's one thing that I also do usually in the morning when I'm doing my maintenance, like we're going to do together here. And then I have a pest issue on one of my fruit trees that I wanted to share with you and talk a little bit about my thinking around why pest issues happen in the garden. But first, let's start here in the high tunnel. As you can see, my tomato plants here are looking a little bit unruly, so they do require some pruning. Pruning is really important for tomato plants for a couple of reasons. Disease prevention is one. Tomatoes are really prone to fungal and bacterial diseases, and those can be mitigated not entirely, but they can be mitigated to a certain extent by good pruning habits to allow good airflow through your plants. So while I don't have any of those issues, knock on wood, here in my high tunnel, I do like to keep my plants pruned well so that I can see the fruit, and it just keeps everything tidy and a little bit more manageable. So we're going to start with just going through everything and pruning off these plants. And what I'm going to do, just for the sake of making this a little bit easier to film, is what I would normally do is do one plant at a time. So I would prune a plant and trellis it up. I use yarn to tie up to my trellises. But for the sake of this, I think what I'm going to do is just go through and I'll prune all of my tomatoes so that you can see how much of the foliage I actually remove from my tomato plants, and then I'll go back after and tie them up. I have talked a lot about how to prune tomatoes, why we prune tomatoes and things like that over the years, so you can look back. Any of my high tunnel videos will probably have at least a little mini tutorial about doing this, so I won't go into it in too much length. But for the sake of those that are new here, and welcome if you are, I'm super happy to have you here. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please consider doing that. That really does help us out. But what we're going to do here is, if you can look at this tomato plant, you can see the main stem coming down right here. And in between where you'll have a leaf and the main stem, you'll have a little branch that starts to form off here. This is called a sucker, and we want to pull those suckers off. This is particularly true if you live in a short growing season like I do, because these little branches are not going to have enough time to produce fruit and ripen that fruit in our short season. So really all it's doing is causing the plant to put energy into growing these instead of putting the energy into producing the fruit that I'm going to allow it to have on here. So what we're going to do is go through, we'll pinch off any of those. We're going to pull off any extra leaves, particularly off the bottom. A lot of plant diseases come in through the soil, so when you're watering from splashing up, that soil gets on the leaves and then those fungal diseases can get into your plant. So it's a good idea to keep the leaves off the bottom of your plant. So again, I don't have that issue here, but it's a good practice anyway, so I do it. So we're going to go through, pull off all of these extra branches, all of these extra suckers, and you can be gentle about this if you like, but you can also not be gentle about it and just get the job done. And when you're growing this many tomato plants, being efficient is important. I have, I think, around 120, 130 tomato plants in the high tunnel this year. So I'm just going to go along, get everything pruned. You'll be able to see by the pile forming along the pathway how much I'm really taking off of each plant. And I have not been as studious about keeping my plants pruned, so there's probably going to be quite a few leaves as we go here. Oh, if you ever come into your high tunnel, let's see if I have an example here. I do. And you see little droplets of water along the edge of your leaves like this. What that is the plant actually releasing extra water, surplus water that it has. A plant will do something called transpiration, which means that the water gets sucked up through the roots, comes up through the stem, in through the leaves, and then it will either leave the leaves, the excess water, via evaporation if it's warm enough, but if it's cool, cool, like in the evening, sometimes that water will form on the leaves. It won't be able to evaporate until morning, and that's what you're seeing on your leaves. I always think it's really beautiful when I come into my high tunnel in the early morning and it has been cool at night. All of the leaves on all of the plants will have these little beads of water along the edge, and I think it looks really beautiful. But let's get back to work. That actually wasn't as heavy as a prune as I was thinking I was going to have to do. I guess I've been doing better with it than I thought that I was. So all I use here is some wool yarn, and I pull pieces off. I just find this so easy to work with. It's gentle on the plants. It rips off really easy in the fall when I want to take all my vines down. So I just rip off a bunch of these, fill my pockets, and then head along and tie everything up so everything looks nice and neat. A little bit of maintenance, my friends, goes a long way in the vegetable garden to helping it stay something that you can continue to enjoy throughout the summer. Even just 15 or 20 minutes of coming out and doing a little bit of weeding, a little bit of trellising, whatever's required in your particular garden. Yeah, goes a long way to keeping it manageable throughout the season. It's pretty normal for a garden to hit a little bit of a wild state at some points throughout the season. I find for me, it's usually mid-August when harvest season really starts kicking in. My garden can get a little bit out of control at that point, but all the maintenance that I did earlier in the season really does help that stage be not quite as overwhelming as it can be. And the other thing too, Dan's building the deck in the background, by the way, so we're going to hear some power tool noises, which I know you're probably used to if you've been here for a while. I was just thinking about this while I was back there looking at some of my determinate tomato plants, is that you do not want to prune determinate tomato plants. So those are bush style tomatoes that have a predetermined size that they're going to grow to. They're not vining like these indeterminate tomatoes that you can see here. You can do a little bit of pruning. Let's take you over to one and I'll show you. So these guys right here, these are Manitoba bush tomatoes. So these are a determinate variety of tomato. And as you can see, the way that they grow is very different. It's like a bush. This one back here, this is actually coming through the trellis on this side, but this one is an Amish paste. So you can see how much taller it is, skinnier, there's more space between the leaves, whereas these look more like a bush. This has a predetermined number of tomatoes that this plant's going to grow, and because it's going to flower and produce all its tomatoes at once, anything you pull off this plant basically just cuts down the amount of fruit that this plant can grow. I do recommend growing determinate varieties of tomatoes if you live in a short growing season, especially something that's bred for northern growing like the Manitoba bush, because it usually will produce all its fruit early, which is what you want in the north. So the Manitoba bush is one that I always grow. The only thing that I will do with pruning these is I will pull off leaves. So leaves aren't going to produce fruit, right? Just branches. So I will sometimes clear off the leaves if I'm noticing that there's just not a lot of airflow happening, or some of the leaves are starting to look a little bit sad, like that one. I'll go and pull those off, but not fruiting branches. You do still need to stake or trellis in some kind of way, bush style tomatoes like this. So what I normally will do is I'll take I don't know if I have a long enough one here, probably not, but I'll take a piece of long yarn and I'll tie it here, and then I'll kind of wrap it around the plant like that and bring it over this way just to hold it all up off the ground. So that's usually all that the bush style tomatoes require. Normally what I do for fertilizing my entire garden, including my pepper plants, is I will give them a really good layer on the bed of well-rotted manure compost in the spring. And that is usually sufficient to give them enough nitrogen and nutrients to get them all the way through the summer. I didn't do that this spring in my high tunnel. I don't remember why I didn't. I know I wasn't going to out in the garden because I had actually some extra nitrogen issues last year in the garden, but I ended up doing that anyway, but I didn't do it in here. So you can see that my pepper plants are a little bit yellowed. So pepper plants are really susceptible to overwatering, and I did overwater them one night. And you can see that a lot of the new growth that's coming in on the top is nice and dark green. And where I'd overwatered, you can actually see where the overwatering happened, right around here, because I ended up with some yellowing leaves here. But I'm kind of an intuitive gardener. I've talked about this before, but I really go by feel. And I feel like these plants need some food. So I bought some new fertilizer that I haven't tried before. You guys actually turned me on to a channel called Garden Answers, which is just a phenomenal gardening channel. She primarily focuses on perennial, well, actually she does a lot of annuals too, but ornamental gardens, whereas my focus is definitely more on vegetable production. I know she has a smaller vegetable garden, but still so much good information on that channel. And she uses a fertilizer called Garden Tone. And I just have to run up to the house because I realized I forgot it up there. So I ordered some on Amazon, and I thought that I would give these pepper plants a feeding of that fertilizer and see if I can't give them a little bit more of a boost and get them going for the summer. So I'll be right back. Okay, this is the stuff. So for garden beds, feed seedlings and transplants, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is sprinkle 1 1/3 cups per 5 feet row, or 10 pounds for 100-foot row. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. One of my friends says she just does it with her heart, whatever it is in her garden, which I absolutely love. Fertilizes with her heart or waters with her heart. So I'm gonna fertilize with my heart right now. So there's what our fertilizer looks like, just granular. I'm gonna add a little bit of this to my ginger as well. So my ginger is looking a little bit sad, but since I brought it out to the high tunnel, all of a sudden it's sending out all kinds of new growth from the bottom. So I'm hoping that the heat and the sun in the high tunnel is going to help to give it a boost. And you might notice that I took my shade cloth off of my high tunnel. Normally I have a shade cloth, a 30% shade cloth on here in the summertime, but it's been quite overcast and we're actually supposed to have rain off and on for the next week. So I decided to take it off to give my plants a little bit of extra light. So we're just going to sprinkle this. It does say not to put it right around the base of the plant. Now we need to water this in. Because I have drip irrigation in here, there's not going to be water at the top of the soil to kind of push this fertilizer into the soil. So I have a hose hooked up to my drip irrigation back there. So I'm going to do that and hand water this in. And then I'm actually going to turn my drip irrigation off and give my high tunnel a water. I usually run my drip irrigation for around 2 hours every 3 or 4 days or so. If it's really hot, sometimes I need to run it every day, but usually 2 hours is sufficient enough to get a nice deep watering. All right, friends, now we are going to head up to the main garden. Now that we have things fertilized, the drip is turned on. I better set my timer or I'm gonna forget to turn it off. Maintenance this time of year in the garden is mostly about weeding. I'm not having to do a ton of harvesting, although we do get to harvest some things today, which is exciting. But for the most part, outside of greens, I'm getting lots of greens out of the garden. But for the most part, it's just maintaining the weed population. And because we've had so much rain over the last couple of weeks, the weeds have proliferated. So normally I'll spend at least a half an hour out here weeding every morning. This bed here, the fennel on the end here needs a little bit of weeding, but the ground is so wet and it's not great to weed when the ground's really wet because everything just kind of comes out in clumps. So I'm going to wait until hopefully we're supposed to get some more rain today, but hopefully at least even in a couple hours, it should be a lot easier to weed. So I'll come out and do that then. But over here where the garlic is just looking so good. We are going to go and pull off our garlic scapes. So I'll show you what those are. My garlic is not going to be picked for probably 4 more weeks or so. what we're waiting for is the bottom 4 to 5 leaves to die and completely dry and become crispy. And that will signal to us that, as the gardener, that the garlic is ready to pull. But when we're getting a lot of rain, when the garlic is really starting to put on size at this point, we can end up with some splitting in the garlic. So if you are getting a lot of rain, start doing some test pulls of your garlic when you know that it's starting to bulb up a little bit, and just watch for that splitting. And if it starts to split, your best bet is to actually pull all your garlic at that point. So I'm gonna pull a garlic right now and see where we're at. I'm really hopeful that we're not having any splitting happening, because my garlic is just looking gorgeous this year. But, or at least I think it is. I haven't actually pulled any yet. It certainly is from the top anyway. So let's grab this one right here. And so that is not a bad size for this time of year. Okay, so this is really good news. I just pulled off the outside part of my garlic here. And as you can see, there's no splitting happening on that at all. And I can tell just by looking at this has a ways to go. So it is going to be massive. This garlic, at least the variety that's on this end, which is a purple Russian, is going to be massive, which is very exciting. So, oh, it smells so good. I love the smell of fresh food. Oh my gosh. I love the beauty of growing food. I love the taste of it, but the smell of it just does something very good to my brain. Okay, so now we're gonna pick scapes. We don't have that many scapes to pick yet. So this is what a garlic scape looks like. And it grows right here. So the plant is coming up this way, and then it comes right out of the top. And all you have to do is snap it off like so. One thing that is really nice about garlic scapes is they'll hold up in the fridge for me for a couple of days, as long as I keep them. I usually put a damp piece of paper towel or something in a Ziploc bag in with them, just to keep them nice and crisp. And then I can turn them into whatever I want to turn them into a few days later if I don't have time, like I don't have today, to be able to actually process them. The same thing is going to go for the berries that we're going to go pick in a minute over in the forest garden. But I'll talk about that once we get over there. So now let's get all these scapes picked. The reason that we want to pick these scapes is because this is the flower. So this part right here will turn into the flower of the plant, and the plant will be putting a lot of energy into producing this flower and this seed, but we want that energy to go into creating a nice, gorgeous, big garlic bulb. So if we pull these off now, you will end up with larger garlics. And trust me, this really does make a difference. I have left them on before, and there is a very big difference in the size of the bulb when you pull them. So I think I'm gonna get quite a few garlic scapes today though, which is exciting. If you want a lot of actual garlic scapes to turn into whatever you want to turn into, you can wait until they start to curl around before you pull them off. If you're not looking for a large amount of garlic scapes to turn into something, then you can just pull them off as soon as you see them. It's not necessary to let them go. And in fact, the more you let them grow, the more energy is going into that instead of the bulb. So any that I see that are coming up today, I'm going to be pulling out. You guys might remember a couple years ago, I used to wear an apron style harvesting basket, and I actually had to stop wearing that because it was really hurting my back just with where the weight was. They do make another one that goes over the shoulders, but I just don't like the feeling of over the shoulder aprons. You'll notice even in the kitchen, I usually just wear the cafe style apron. So that's why I don't wear it anymore. It's a great apron, and if you don't end up have back issues, then it would be perfectly fine to use. But yeah, normally I just carry things with my hands. I do have a little metal wheelbarrow that's actually sitting behind us here that I use for harvesting, that's very light. And excuse me. And I just bring it up onto my deck when we're doing really large harvests, but when we're doing just little harvests like this, I just use my hands. So happy with the little potato patch that I put here. As far as all this rain, it has really made the potatoes take off, and I actually just noticed that they're starting to form their flowers already. So hopefully it'll be a good potato year this year. And I just wanted to show you this. So do you remember when we stomped down all of the comfrey around our fruit trees the other day? So you can see how I stomped down the plant around there, and where the flowers are on the top part of the plant, they've kind of curved back up again because I didn't kill the plant by stepping on it like that. I was explaining that what I used to do is cut them right off and then lay them as a mulch around the trees. And now I do it this way because the bumblebees absolutely love comfrey flowers. It seems to be their favorite thing outside of the raspberries. So this way, the bumblebees still get to feed on those flowers, but my fruit trees still get the mulch, like so. And what's kind of interesting is I've never had, let me put this down here. I have never had a comfrey plant grow and then without me either stomping it down like this or cutting it down, but I do have one over here. So this is kind of interesting. This comfrey plant is not one that was around a fruit tree, so I decided I was just going to let it grow and not stomp it down. And you can see it actually fell over naturally exactly the way that I was doing it, stomping it down like that. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. And on the note of interesting, I have one more thing to show you before we pick berries. If you have been here for a while, you have probably already guessed this about me, but I am a very curious person, and I love information, and I love observing things and studying them and trying to figure them out, why things are the way that they are. And I was walking by this fruit tree. So this is a cherry tree that you can see behind me here. And this cherry tree has been doing spectacularly well since I planted it 7 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago now, considering the circumstances of its origin. I got it from a nursery that had experienced a massive hailstorm and combined with like some freezing issues, and a lot of their fruit trees had been destroyed. So they just offered them up free to see if anybody wanted to try to revive them. And this was one of those trees. As you can see, it's all kind of gnarly and twisted. There was nothing that I could do to try to straighten the trunk out. This is just the way the tree grew. And it has done really well for me and produced amazing cherries for me for the last few years. But this spring, there were some things about this tree that I noticed. It had had quite a bit of die-off on the ends of the trees or at the ends of the branches. And in fact, there's still a few that you can see up on the top here that don't have, a little bit higher, that don't have leaves on them that have died. And sometimes things like this just happen. There's always a reason for them, but oftentimes we can't figure it out. We don't know what happened. Maybe there was a freeze at a specific point where the sap was still running in the branches or something. I don't know. But either way, this tree was not in excellent condition in the spring. So I pruned it back fairly heavily, removed most of the dead branches from it, but it never really rebounded. And even when it leafed out in the early spring, I noticed right away that it just wasn't producing as many leaves. There weren't as many flowers and all that kind of stuff. So my thought was that the plant had undergone a lot of stress, and it would probably take a year or two for it to fully rebound from whatever that stress was. I have had this idea about symbiosis in the garden and the balance of a garden, and that when there is a problem that you notice in the garden, there is usually a cause. So I'm thinking of pests specifically right now. So if you have a pest problem in your garden, it's that there's something that's out of balance in the garden that's causing that pest to be able to proliferate. I haven't actually experienced this personally before this situation, which I'm going to show you in a second, but it's always been an idea I've had. And I did take a master gardening program a year and a half or so ago, and the education that I received in that program confirmed that belief, but I haven't been able to see it in practice. So I was walking by this fruit tree yesterday or the day before, and I just kind of walked up and I got close and I was looking at it and observing what was going on. And something that I noticed was that there was about 6 or 7 ladybugs on this tree. And I have also noticed this year we have had a lot more ladybugs in the garden than usual. So I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. And then right away my brain went, ladybugs on a fruit tree probably means that there's aphids, because ladybugs love to eat aphids or some other kind of pest on the tree. And sure enough, we have aphids on the fruit tree. Can you see them? Those little black spots there, those are aphids. And so as I was watching the ladybugs, I watched them go up and start munching on aphids, which is great because they will eat a lot of aphids in a day, and there were quite a few ladybugs on the tree at the time. What I think is really fascinating is I have not had aphids on my fruit trees at all. We've been here for almost 10 years. Maybe 1 year, maybe I had a few aphids on one of my plum trees, but nothing that required any type of treatment and nothing that I really made a mental note of. And this is the first time. So what is super interesting about this to me is that the tree was struggling, which I already knew that it was struggling. And the fact that it has developed a pest issue like that. None of the other trees around here have this particular issue. There aren't any aphids anywhere else in my garden. So I just think that is fascinating and also interesting that I have had a proliferation of ladybugs this year that I have never had before in my garden as well. So it does seem that issues like aphids and other pest issues like this are really affected by the weather. And our weather this year has also been different than I think there's only been one other summer that I've seen this much moisture. I'm not complaining, it keeps the forest fire risk down, but it does mean that there's a change in the way that my garden is because it's getting a lot more moisture than it's used to. So I'm sure that has a part to play in this too. And I just find things like this really, really fascinating. I have made a decision that I may potentially regret, so we'll have to wait and see. But I am going to not do anything about this. I've thought about this a lot. I've been asking around different ways to treat the aphids, but because I do have ladybugs already in here, naturally taking care of this issue, I am going to let it be. Now, I do run a risk doing this because this plant is already stressed. Those aphids are going to stress the plant even more. But if a natural balance can occur in my garden where the ladybugs come in and take care of this issue, then that's better than using any other type of remediation that I could potentially use. So what I would probably choose to use in this case is a neem oil spray. And if in, say, 2 weeks' time, this problem hasn't kind of been mitigated naturally by the ladybugs, then I may choose to do something. But for right now, I'm just going to let it run its course. I've kind of taken that philosophy into my forest garden in general. So where we are right now, so this forest garden that you see behind me here is inspired by permaculture practices. We built this 8 years ago. I believe we're on our 8th year with it right now. And you can look back at actually the build of this garden space, and it's quite amazing what it's grown into at this point. But I have really taken a pretty hands-off approach with it. I started with a lot more hands-on with this, with lots of mulch and trying to battle weeds and all that kind of stuff. And what I have decided to do at this point, outside of keeping it mowed so that it looks a little bit tidier, is I'm kind of letting it do its thing. Forest garden / orchard / permaculture jungle that you can see here is something that has brought me a lot of joy. And it's kind of, I feel like I got a little bit lucky with building this. I did do a lot of research into kind of permaculture practices, but really I just kind of threw caution to the wind and followed my heart with building this, and it turned out really well. It's absolutely bursting with life, and we're getting a lot of food out of this every year. I'm really hopeful that this cherry tree here and doing this kind of hands-off approach, we'll see, because I do believe that there's a time and a place for intervention. Of course there is, but I don't think that that's quite where we're at right now, and especially because we have the natural predators that are kind of moved in here. But I'll keep you updated on the cherry tree, and we'll see what happens with that. Before we go pick the haskaps, I just wanted to show you this beautiful peony plant. So for the most part, everything in here is either medicinal or edible in some kind of way, but I do have some plants that are just for the beauty of them. The columbine, the purple flower that you can see back there are one of those, and then this peony. You can actually use these peony petals for creating jelly and even a juice, and I have done that in the past, but this year I'm just going to let them be beautiful. This one has a hot pink little splash on the inside. It's just stunning. This is a haskap, and this is what haskap berries look like. Somebody said to me that they look like pig snouts, and now I can't unsee it. So anyway, what we're gonna do here is pick these berries. One thing I will say about haskaps, well, there's a few things I'll say about them. Number one, they are the best thing to grow if you live in the north, because they are the first to bloom in the spring and the first to produce fruit. The berries are absolutely fantastic. They taste like a combination between a blueberry, a little hint of kind of raspberry, but the berry that I feel like they are most like is a huckleberry. If you've ever had a huckleberry, this tastes very similar to a huckleberry. The other thing about them, though, to keep in mind is that the birds love them. So far, the birds have not found this, but the birds really love them. I had to put a net over my haskaps last year. This is one that I dearly wish I had planted when I first planted the forest garden. I wish I had put them all the way across the top. I actually have 3 more up at the house that I need to come down and plant here because I just love them so much. I do have one that I planted there that was nice and big like this, and it died back in the spring, but there's tons of new growth that's coming up. So I have to go in and prune out all that dead stuff there, but I am excited about this. So my favorite thing to make with these, besides just eating them, which I'm going to try to refrain from doing because I really want to make this jam, is to make sun jam. I have made sun jam on my channel before, but I will do it again. In fact, we'll do that in the next video if I have enough berries here, but this plant is loaded, so I think that we'll get enough. We'll make some sun jam together. It is absolutely delicious, so delicious. A little time consuming, and you don't get a lot at the end, but it is 100% worth it. So when I'm picking berries, I tend to use small bowls. Yogurt containers are really good size because berries tend to be fragile. And if you put too much weight on the top of them, then the ones on the bottom can get crushed. So better to use little containers like this for berry picking. Okay, I'm gonna get both hands involved here or this is gonna take me forever. And I shall be back with you when I am finished, and I'll show you what I ended up getting. And then in the next video, along with the garlic scapes, we will make ourselves some sun jam. All right, we have this cute little harvest of berries, of scapes, of garlic. The really nice thing about berries is you can just throw them into the freezer. You can just give them a rinse and throw them in the freezer and then pull them out when you are ready to make jam. And that can even apply to a couple months down the road, maybe jam making something that you want to do in the fall. You collect up all your berries over the summer and then make your jam with frozen berries. Works perfectly well. So my plan with these berries, I'm going to get another probably 2 pickings off of this. There's lots of unripe berries on here. I'll collect up the amount that I need to make our jam, which I mentioned to my kids that I was going to make sun jam, and they were very excited because it is the best jam. It's so good. All right, friends, that is going to be it for me today. It's time to head back up to the house. I have enjoyed hanging out here in the garden with you. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye, everyone.